This is going to be extremely long, so I apologize in advance. I'm not entirely sure if my story should be posted here, since we knew who was stalking us the whole time, but just couldn't prove it. And technically, it wasn't just me who was being stalked, but my whole family. I'm going to post anyway though, because the experience was terrifying. To give a little bit of background information, this started in the winter of 2012. I was 23 years old at the time and living with my dad. My mom and my brother were living in another house about 10 minutes away from us. One morning, I woke up at around 8 a.m. because I had an early doctor's appointment, and I went outside to see a note pinned to the windshield wiper of our car. The note said, "I'm going to kill you, you freaking creep scum." I kind of just laughed it off. I assumed the note was for my dad, who had a habit of complaining to parents in our neighborhood about their children's crappy behavior. There were these twin boys who liked to try and catch and torture squirrels. We often marched them home by the ears to complain about them to their parents. I thought one of the parents was being a jerk, so my dad and I didn't bother with it too much. Later in the day, while talking to my mom on the phone, I mentioned the note to her offhandedly in a very casual way, and I was shocked by her response. She responded by very empathetically warning me several times to make sure all of my windows and doors were locked and to bring a weapon to bed with me at night. I was a bit taken aback because she had never said anything to me like that before. She'd never even give me the good touch, bad touch talk. She reminded me at least 12 times over the course of the conversation to bring a knife or a baseball bat to bed with me and to lock my bedroom door at night. Of course, I thought she was overreacting, so I waved her off. Then other weird things started happening. We started getting random packages and deliveries sent to our house. Bibles and Qurans, newspapers, porn flyers, pizzas, and moving trucks that we hadn't ordered. The first few times it happened, I thought it was a mistake, but as it kept happening, I came to the conclusion that somebody must be pulling a prank on us. We didn't know who it was, so there was nothing we could really do about it, but apologized profusely to yet another confused pizza delivery man. In September of that year, I started taking a night school class with my best friend. The course went from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. every Monday and Wednesday night, and after the class, his mom would pick us up and drive us home. Sometime in November, his mom dropped me off from school, and I went inside and chilled on the couch for a couple of hours. I like to wind down a bit before I go to bed or I can't sleep. I ended up falling asleep on the couch. Something woke me up abruptly at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I heard the unmistakable sound of a car tire being slashed, and it sounded like our car. What the heck was going on? We didn't have any enemies. In retrospect, this was probably a stupid thing to do, especially considering that I'm a relatively small female. I'm only 5'5", and I was 23 at the time. But I grabbed the generic kitchen knife and went outside to check it out. When I got out there, I discovered immediately that I was correct. There was a man in our driveway slashing our tires. Unwisely, I immediately yelled, "Hey, you," and he turned around to face me. That was when I noticed what he was slashing our tires with, an enormous hunting knife, at least 6 inches long. He looked surprised, but then defiant, and began to advance towards me with the knife slightly raised. I just froze, and I didn't know what to do. He was coming at me pretty fast, I couldn't even think. Thankfully, at that exact second, my across-the-street neighbor, who had also heard him slashing our tires, turned on his porch light and yelled out the window, "Hey, I'm calling the cops." The man yelled back, "I don't give a crap. Call him then." But he quickly retreated back to his car, where I could see a middle-aged woman with long brown hair waiting for him in the passenger seat. Our eyes locked, and I knew instantly that we had met before, but I couldn't quite put my finger on when or where. I just knew in my gut that I had met this woman before. They sped off into the night, and we called the police, who said they couldn't do anything for us because they didn't know who had done it. I mean, isn't that kind of your job, though, to find out who did? I called my mom to tell her what happened and to ask her if she had any idea who would have done this to us. She immediately said no, but there was something in her voice. I could just tell she wasn't being honest. A few weeks later, I decided to go to my mom's house to spend a day or two there, determined to get some answers. As soon as I walked in the front door, I knew something was off. The second she saw me, she just started bawling her eyes out. She took me by the hand and sat me on the couch and explained the whole story to me, start to finish. It's kind of necessary for me to give a little bit of background information here. My mom is a businesswoman by trade. She was still in sales at the time, but she's also a bit of a hippy-dippy. Astrology and pot and reincarnation and Mercury is retrograding, so don't get into any arguments this week type of person. On the side of her regular day job, she was also selling Arbonne makeup, which is an all-natural brand of makeup that is free of parabens, oils, sulfates, and other common cosmetic additives. A couple of months before all of this started, she ended up being referred a new client named Andrea by her weed dealer. Yes, my mom smokes weed. This is Canada. Everybody smokes weed here. Andrea was her dealer's girlfriend, and she was interested in buying Arbin. So my mom invited her over to her apartment to look at some makeup samples. They started chatting a bit about a variety of topics, as many women like to do, and my mom let it slip that her last name was Hayes. As my mom told me, Andrea had paused for a few seconds, looked at her, and then said, "Hayes, did you used to be married to a man named Darren Hayes?" My mom answered that yes, Darren Hayes, my father, was her ex-husband. And then shockingly, this Andrea woman had actually bursted into tears, thrown her arms around my mom in a hug, and begun to tell her this horrific story about all the disgusting things that my dad had done to her. Apparently, when she was 14, she's now in her mid-30s. I would have been about 4 years old at the time, so this would have happened around 1994. She had been dating a man named Andrew, who happened to be living with my dad at the time of my parents' divorce. According to Andrea, these men, her boyfriend Andrew, Andrew's twin brother Daniel, and my father, had taken turns beating her, assaulting her, and then forcing her to prostitute herself in order to make money off of her, from which she said that she had never recovered. At this point, I realized that this is where I'd recognized her from. My dad had been roommates with her boyfriend Andrew, and I used to see all three of them when I went over there to visit him every second weekend. She cried inconsolably during the whole retelling of the story, telling my mom how after this traumatic experience she had turned to drugs and alcohol to numb the pain of her abuse. Now she had been addicted to crack and alcohol off and on ever since because of what my father had done to her. My mom was so shocked that she didn't know what to do. On the one hand, she knew my father to be a generous, soft-spoken, kind person who had never lifted a finger to hurt her or any other person and who rarely raised his voice. But on the other hand, it seemed odd that Andrea would just happen to remember his name all of these years later if she had been lying. She didn't know who to believe. After several hours of crying and much consoling on my mother's part, Andrea finally left. That was when the stalking began. A few days after this encounter, my mom came home from work to find Andrea's boyfriend sitting on her couch waiting for her. He immediately told her that he was planning on killing my dad, and that my dad deserved to die because he was a freaking piece of crap, and that if my mom ever told anyone, anybody at all, especially the cops, that he would be sure to kill me as well. He then concluded his threat by describing the layout of our living room and exactly what outfit I was wearing that day. From then on, he and/or Andrea would text or call her several times a day to threaten and taunt her, telling her that they were going to call the cops on my dad and have him thrown in prison, that they were going to have him killed, and that if she told anybody, they would hire somebody to also murder me, and do much worse, by the way. Naturally, my mom was absolutely terrified. She was from an upper middle class family who had immigrated to Canada from Germany. She had never dealt with this type of person before. She stopped eating, couldn't sleep, and stopped going to work. She lost at least 30 pounds, and her hair started falling out from stress. She started having panic attacks because she didn't know what to do. Later, she told me that she understood how I felt now because I have an anxiety disorder that causes me to experience panic attacks. Eventually, after the night when I almost got stabbed, she decided that she had to call the cops. She couldn't take the chance that they would hurt me. She had to do something about it, and what she found out was shocking. Andrea was well known to the police. When my mom told them the story, she was so well known that they weren't even surprised to hear her story. In fact, they told her Andrea had done this exact thing to at least a dozen other men. She would meet and blackmail men into giving her money, electronics, drugs, etc., threatening to call the cops and report them for assault if they didn't. Her boyfriend, who was a dealer of other drugs than just weed as it turned out, would often use his drug connections to intimidate and extort the men, and for some reason, he never questioned her stories of being assaulted, abused, and enslaved by all of these different men, because there is no doubt in my mind that he genuinely believed that she was telling the truth. Then when Andrea, who was a crack and heroin addict and prostitute, would get arrested on a possession or a drug distribution charge, she would attempt to make deals with the police by offering them information about men who had done horrible things and creeps in exchange for less time in prison. She eventually did this so many times that the police stopped believing her. After my mom called the cops, the whole story came undone, and Andrea and her boyfriend, thankfully, haven't bothered us since. But it's been over a year since the whole thing happened, and I'm still terrified to leave the curtains open at nighttime in case somebody is watching me. I don't think I'll ever be able to feel fully safe in this house ever again. A little background. I was about 8 and my mom, my little sister, and I were taking a road trip across Wyoming. This wasn't unusual as we had family living all across the state and my mom loved piling us in the car and driving. My memory of this event is patchy and I remember it more for the way my mom reacted than the event itself. I don't remember exactly where this was or where we were headed, but anybody who has ever driven through Wyoming knows that the roads are mostly deserted. We had been driving several hours behind an older green and white truck. We were approaching a gas station and I remember my little sister being so excited because she wanted to get those little bottles made of wax that had juice in them. The green and white truck pulls into the gas station and we follow. We use the restroom and get some snacks and my mom fills up with gas and we get back into the car on the road. A little time passes. My mom asked, "Is that truck behind us the same one that we followed into the gas station?" I turn in my seat and confirm that it is the same truck. I sit back down and continue gorging myself on snacks, but I sense that my mom is uneasy. She keeps looking in her rearview mirror and watching the truck. It was a long drive to the next gas station and along the way, the truck behind us would speed up and get dangerously close to us and then back away a little bit. After a stretch of several miles, we were nearing another gas station. My mom adjusts her mirror so she can see us in the back seat. She says, "I'm going to pull into this gas station and open the door like I'm getting out. I don't want you two to open your doors. Don't get out, okay? Just sit tight and hang on." My little sister and I look at each other like, okay. I thought it was weird, but the look in her eye scared me a little bit. My mom is usually a calm person, but she has this presence about her that makes you aware that she isn't to be messed with. All of my friends throughout the years have been a little bit scared of her, which is odd considering that she is just over 5 feet tall and maybe 100 pounds. Anyways, we pull into the station and up to a pump. My mom adjusts her mirror to see behind us and opens her door with the car still running. The green and white truck pulls in and parks just to the side of the turn-in. The driver pops his hood, gets out, comes around to the front of his truck, and props his hood up. He starts messing around under the hood with his back to us. From what I remember of him, he was a really big guy, but who isn't to an 8-year-old girl? My mom slams her door and peels out of the gas station. I turn in my seat to watch the man. He turns around like he was startled, looks right at us, and quickly closes his hood, even though he has only been looking in there for a few seconds. At this point, my mom is driving so fast that I lose sight of him. I was terrified and I knew it must be serious for my mom to drive like this. Up ahead, the road bent sharply to the left and there was a small road to the right with a few buildings. Just before the bend, my mom slams on the brakes, pulls the steering wheel all the way to the right and, as if it were straight out of an action movie, slides around the corner. She speeds through the small parking lot of one of the buildings and parks behind it. From our vantage point, we were hidden from traffic behind us but could see anyone passing. A short time later, we watched the green and white truck speed right past us and around the bend in the road. Obviously, my sister and I were very shaken up. My mom asked if we needed to use the bathroom and I said yes. She said she did too, but we would have to wait here for a bit, then make our way to the next station. I'll never forget what she said next because it was so out of character for her. She said, "I'd rather pee myself in this car than be murdered on the side of the road." A little time passed and we got back on the road and we continued on our trip. We never saw that truck again. I've lived most of my life out in the valley countryside of Ontario. Given that's not a whole lot for an 18-year-old, but for me, it's the only place I can call home and I like to think that I know the entire area, as far and sprawling as it is, like the back of my hand. Adventures across the long crossing roads, pastures, and woods that made up the skeleton of my village were a common venture in my childhood. As a young kid, I had a habit of biking extremely far out in hopes of finding new places, and sometimes my dad or one of my friends' parents would toss out bikes in their pickup and take us way out into a back road and let us explore for a few hours. This was how a lot of us first found that on one of these crappy gravel roads, surrounded by thin woods, was a worn down old shack sitting just about 20 meters off of the path. Honestly, I never thought anything of it, except for the fact that it was creepy. It had no windows to see inside and I never went anywhere near it, but one of my friends at the time said that her older sister had tried to go in it and that the door was always locked. We all had better things to be curious about at the time other than that anyway, so I quickly moved on and it became nothing more than a mundane landmark of that area. Honestly, I'd completely forgotten about it for a few years. Except last Tuesday, I was coming home from one of my very late classes at university, and I usually take the back roads I pursued many years ago, as they're more straightforward and scarce ever have any sort of traffic. As I drove down the gravel path that would wind along the side of the country and eventually take me to the next street I needed to turn onto, I noticed a faint glinting coming from within the trees up ahead, maybe about 100 meters from my car. A flashlight, I thought, but as my car came closer, I realized what I was really seeing. The light inside of the shack was on. I should mention now that in all of my nearly 13 years I've spent living in this area, I have never seen the door open and I have never seen a light on inside of that shack ever. Not even once. I must have driven past that shack probably almost 100-something times in my life, but this was the first time I'd ever seen any sign of a person's presence having been anywhere near that thing. That, coupled with the fact that it was 10 o'clock at night and pitch black outside, aside from my own headlights and the incandescent glow lighting up the doorframe up ahead, immediately filled me with what I can only describe as a weird sense of dread. It would be hard for most people not to be immediately unsettled by something like that, and I am someone who's easily spooked. Fortunately, while my car approached the light, I was curious enough that despite the feeling in my stomach, I slowed down as I was about to pass, hoping that I could see what was going on inside. And this is probably the only reason I managed to spot the dark shape that burst out of the foliage on the side of the road, directly into my path. I wasn't going very fast at that point, but I still slammed on the brakes rather hard in alarm, so my car came to a crunching stop on the gravel. For a moment, I was just really confused and freaked out. What was that? Had I almost hit a deer? This was far out in the country. A deer would have been the most likely and most reasonable assumption, but in the beams of my car, I could see what had stopped me. A very, very tall, lanky old man, with scraggly and balding gray hair. Right away, I got the impression that this man was very poor. He looked dirty and unkempt, and his clothes hung off of him. However, I'm generally used to seeing people who aren't that well off in my town, and I don't like to judge them right away based off that sort of thing, but I was mostly just extremely unsettled over what the heck this guy was doing way out here, and why he'd walked out in front of my car like that. As I sat there confused, the old man came around to my window and knocked on the glass. Feeling my memories of stranger danger, conversations with my parents kicking in, as old as those conversations were, I rolled down the window just a crack, only enough for someone to be able to hear me and for me to hear them. I was already creeped out enough as it was. Immediately, I had to say what I was thinking. What are you doing out here? I asked. In my peripheral vision, I could still see the light from the shack, but in my mind's eye, I wasn't really registering it anymore. Stupid, I know. I should have made the connection immediately, but I was still kind of shaken by the fact that I could have run this guy over if I hadn't been able to stop in time. And being a new driver especially and all. The thought of that was terrifying. After a small pause, the man started talking to me. He had a thick, croaky sort of voice, and he spoke very slowly. "My truck is broken," he explained. Okay. I was also getting the feeling that he wasn't all there, mentally. I didn't have to look around to notice that there wasn't any truck on the side of the road, but I did anyway, turning my head around to confirm what I already knew. There was definitely no truck. Had he somehow driven into the trees? As far as I could remember and see, there wasn't enough space anywhere in them for a truck to fit through. What was the man talking about? While I was looking, it was honestly as though I could feel that he was watching me, and when I turned back, he was still leaning down to peer inside of my window at me. "Where? I don't see it," I blurted out. I was definitely distrustful of this guy already. At first he didn't respond, and my nerves were only getting worse the longer we were alone out here. Then he replied, "It's just up the road," he said, turning just to point with his finger in that general direction. The lights on my car aren't exactly the greatest, but I could still see far enough that I really couldn't imagine where on earth this truck was supposed to be. I couldn't spot the faintest sight of it. While I squinted up ahead, he continued, "I'll show you where, if you come." At this point, I really had no idea what this old man was thinking I could do to help. I'm 18 years old, a female, and very petite. I don't exactly look like the type of person who knows a lot about cars or how to fix them, and for the record, I'm really not. But I was tired from a long day at school, so I absolutely was not at my brightest, and for some reason, a part of me felt guilty leaving him out there alone if his truck really was broken. "Okay," I said, and I reached for my gear shift to start driving slowly up the road, but as soon as he saw my hand, he shook his head. "Just walk. It's not too far." "What? Excuse me? No thanks. How the heck was I going to see anything in the dark if I got out of my car and followed him anyway? There was no harm in driving wherever he was trying to lead me. The more I talked to the guy, the more unnerved I was getting, and the more red flags were starting to pop up in my mind. I couldn't see a car anywhere, and this total stranger wanted me to get out of mine and follow him into the dark on this creepy road in the middle of nowhere. I will admit that I am a bit of a naive person, but I'm definitely not that stupid. No, I'd rather drive to it, I responded. This situation really wasn't making any sense to me. I could see his brow furrow, and he looked kind of agitated. He insisted, "Your car won't fit in the trees anyway." So did his truck crash then? Why the trees if we're going up the road? I remembered what I'd just been thinking a minute earlier about how there not being enough space, and I asked him, "Then how did yours get in the trees?" The only logical explanation would have been that his truck had swerved off the road. But even if that were the case, there was seriously nothing in all that I could have done to help him fix his car or get it back out again. It genuinely made no sense at all to be asking me to come with him and help, and the entire situation was beginning to make me very scared. There was a lengthy enough pause between my question and him speaking up that I was beginning to think he didn't hear me or something. So I asked again. Still no immediate answer. When he finally did reply, he was staring at me directly in the eyes. I think I'm going to have nightmares about it for a long time. It was so sudden, and the way he said it was just so unbelievable. Creepy. "You don't look old enough to drive," he said. I hear comments like this a lot. I do look very young because of my size. Normally, somebody would say this with a smile or something to signify that this is, in fact, meant to be taken as a light joke. But the guy's face didn't change even slightly. He just kept staring at me with a completely cold expression. The sheer inappropriateness of such a remark in that kind of situation immediately had my heart racing, and all I could think of was, wow, what did this guy want with me? What I wanted to say next was, "Who the heck are you?" But instead I anxiously fumbled for my phone in my pocket, babbling in a way that probably made it really obvious I was completely freaked out of my mind. Okay, I can just call someone to help you. There's not really anything else I can do." As I said that, it occurred to me to wonder, did this old guy not have a cell phone of his own? I know not every older person has one, even if they're becoming much more common, but seriously. I also remembered with a sudden streak of massive fear. The shack with the light on. I could still see the light coming from it just up ahead in the trees, and my dumb brain finally put two and two together. The old man hadn't even mentioned it at all. It was like it wasn't even there to him, and there was definitely no one out there that could have turned the light on but the guy who was standing outside my car right now. What was he doing out there in that shack then, which had been locked for all of these years by someone I never knew? There was definitely no truck around here. He wanted me out of my car for another reason. I think maybe the old man must have seen on my face that I was scared out of my wits and about to book it out of there. Instead of any words, without warning, his face contorted with rage and he swung his fist, pounding it against my window with enough strength to make it shudder. His eyes were wide and he looked furious and completely insane. Even though I was panicking more than I ever had in my life and I was sure he was about to smash the window if he tried again, I screamed, threw my phone onto the floor, switched gears, and slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. I hurtled down the road, and when I glanced into my rearview mirror, I saw his dark shape turn from standing in the road, and I watched as he turned and walked off the road, directly towards the light of the shack. I didn't slow down at all until I was nearly home and absolutely sure that there was no way that he could have followed me. When I got home that night, I spent a long time crying about what happened with my mom, and though I don't think she believed all of what I told her, we don't have the greatest relationship. She called up everyone she knew to ask if anyone knew the old man or if they knew who owned that shack. In a town like ours, just about everybody knows each other, but nobody had a clue who he was. One of our family friends even swore that he was sure it's been abandoned for at least 4 years now. And since most people don't usually take that road, nobody said that they've ever seen a light on or the door open but me. I've been taking a different route home from school since, and I really don't think I ever want to head back down that road. In case you are wondering, I am a female in my 20s, 5'2", and 100 pounds give or take. This event happened recently while I was at work. It had been a busy day at my small office following a 4-day holiday weekend. Things had slightly settled down by 4 p.m. when a client stopped by to pick up some paperwork. I have known this guy for over 3 years. The extent of our relationship is professional small talk. Nate is a big burly dude with a shaved head and a long beard. In all the time that I have known him, we have not had any major issues. While I'm not sure if this is relevant, I do feel that I should point out that Nate has been acting rather odd towards me for the past year though. Little things, but enough for me to take notice. If I answered the phone when he would call, he wouldn't say anything and just hang up. He'd be super friendly with my coworkers but completely ignore me. It all began about a year prior when my boss informed him that I'm a fellow scuba diver. After discovering this information, Nate repeatedly asked me to be his dive buddy, while assuring me that he knew all of the best spots and where to find secret shipwrecks. He wrote his number on a piece of paper and asked me to call him, but I never did. When he began to act strangely towards me, I just assumed he was offended that I didn't want to go out with him. So on to the reason why this story ever happened. I've had chronic hiccups for the past 15 years. They literally just started out of nowhere one day and have never stopped. Usually, I only get one or two small ones throughout the day, which my friends or family lovingly refer to as the hourly hiccups. However, maybe once or twice a month, I get a bout of which can last for hours. I have seen a doctor about this, of course, yet it still remains a mystery. This was one of those days where I could not stop hiccuping. I was in my office while Nate stayed in the main lobby, and where my boss assisted him. About 5 minutes into their conversation, he yelled, "I know the cure for your hiccups." To which I chuckled. Believe me, I have tried every old wives' tale and trick known to man. What I have learned in over a decade is that the only thing that actually works is time. I continued working in my office, trying to stifle my hiccups and not be too loud. After 3 years of working here, all of my coworkers knew about my problem and barely even notice it anymore. About 45 minutes goes by and they still have not stopped. At this point, I'm pretty fed up. Anybody who has had hiccups for a lengthy amount of time knows that eventually your abdominal muscles get sore and you start to feel nauseous. So when Nate said again, "I know how to cure your hiccups," I was desperate for any relief. I walked out of my office and approached him. "What's your secret?" I asked, to which he simply replied, "You'll see." Figuring it was the usual method to frighten me, I firmly informed him that I did not want to be scared. I'm just one of those people who hates getting startled suddenly. Nate walks past me and says nothing, so I figured his original plan to spook me had been sabotaged. I was just about to turn around and get back to work when he grabbed me from behind. Suddenly, he threw me into a chokehold while forcefully covering my mouth and nose with his hand. Immediately, panic sets in, and I struggle to free myself, but his grip only gets tighter and more intense. It felt like I was being coiled by a boa constrictor. No matter how hard I tried to get him off me, I could not compete with his body weight and strength. I began to punch and kick him, but he only seemed to get angrier. My vision started to turn black, and I became incredibly tired and dizzy. I could feel myself about to pass out. All I wanted was to breathe. How could this be happening? I was about to be murdered at my freaking workplace, while my colleagues were just in one room over the entire time. Although this moment felt like a lifetime, it was probably only 2 minutes. I tried to scream and make noise, but my mouth was covered too tightly. The taste of his hand filled my mouth, and I felt like I was going to be sick. Right as I was drifting out of consciousness, I heard somebody yell, "Hey, get off her. Let her go." My boss, who had previously been making a phone call in his office, had just entered the lobby. He approached Nate and dragged him off me. After the ambush, Nate released me from his grip and began to walk towards the exit nonchalantly. While I stumbled and gasped for air, Nate turned to face me before he left. With a sick and twisted smile, he told me, "That got rid of your hiccups, though." He proceeded to leave while I fought back the tears that were welling. I didn't want him to think that he won somehow. Once he was gone, my boss asked me if I was okay. I only nodded out of embarrassment that I start crying if I attempted to answer. As I made my way back to my office, my brain tried to comprehend what the heck had just transpired in the past 3 minutes. Nothing else was mentioned after Nate left. I wore a collared shirt the next day to hide the bruises that covered my neck, of which I did take photos. Hopefully I never have to use them in the future. I'm sure Nate would say he was just kidding, but the way he drew pleasure from my pain and suffering does not lead me to believe this. My boyfriend wanted me to press assault charges, but honestly, I didn't see the point. Firstly, the police in my area tend to do nothing in these types of situations, and the most disturbing part of all, my boss backed Nate up. He has known him for almost 20 years and pretty much told me that I asked him to do it. What hurts the most is that he doesn't really seem to care about my safety or well-being. I fear that it is only a matter of time before I see Nate again because he is still a client. Since I am not the business owner, I cannot prevent him from returning. In fact, events like this happening at my workplace are the reason why I'm currently looking for a new job. Not to mention I often work by myself, and the office is connected to a psychiatric facility with sometimes problematic patients. Hopefully when Nate does come back, I will no longer be employed there. I truly hope we never meet again. A few months ago, my girlfriend and I were bored hanging around the house and spontaneously decided to go out for a hike. We don't go hiking often, but the idea appealed to both of us, and even though there was only about an hour left of light, we figured that we had enough time to enjoy a hike before it got too dark. We quickly filled up our water bottles and put on the best walking shoes we had, and we were out of the door driving up into the mountains. Around my area, there are many hiking trails, with the variety of trails increasing as you go up into the mountains. We tended to stay around the base of the mountains in the occasional case of us hiking, where most people would still be walking, but we wanted to change things up and progress further up the mountain road to a trail a friend of mine had mentioned. We kept in mind our time and figured that we could hike for a bit and simply enjoy the new environment for us and finish up before it was too late. We arrived at the trailhead and saw that there were no cars left along the road, but didn't think much of it due to the time. We still had a good 45 minutes until dark, so we continued on. We start walking down a fairly steep hill that then recoups the elevation at the bottom with an equally steep hill that you have to ascend. We reach the top and it's smooth sailing from there. We saw a lone coyote off the trail a ways and some rabbits, and I made a quip about how those rabbits might need to be careful with that coyote lurking around. She playfully hit me for that one. Approximately less than a mile into the trail, we saw a large fallen tree that made a bridge over a dried riverbed and decided to take a rest, climb around on it, and take pictures. We were there for about 10 minutes and then resume hiking. We continue on the trail for a short distance until she hears a rustle in the trees behind us. We stopped, mildly spooked due to the assumed size of whatever made that rustling, but continue on only before briefly she decides that she's done and we need to head back. It's twilight now, so I agree with her and we turn around to head back to the car. When we made it back to the fallen tree, my shoe had come untied, so I used the trunk to fix my loose laces and looked behind us for the first time on the hike. Uncharacteristic for me, but hey, I was having fun. Why be paranoid? I see a person dressed entirely in black with their hood on that is a significant distance behind us, walking at a very slow, even pace. It wasn't something out of the ordinary, so what if they were wearing black with their hood on? I wear black most of the time too, and it's cold out. I shouldn't make assumptions. This does trigger me to be more alert, however, and I inform my girlfriend of this person's presence. It's now dusk, and we continue on at an intentionally faster pace and go through a winding section of the trail, and I lose sight of the person. When we come around the final bend of the section, I figure they are far behind us and that there's nothing to worry about. Sooner than later, the person is behind us again, but much closer, probably 50 feet in comparison to 100 feet before, and we had increased our speed, so this alarmed us. We briskly walk around another bend, and as soon as we come around it, we book it. It seemed to be a natural reaction on both of our parts as we just started running without a word said to initiate it. We are nearing the trailhead now, with only the hills to deal with. We catch our breaths for a moment and I turn around again. I see the person seemingly halt a sprint upon noticing me looking back, as if they were trying to uphold the illusion of simply walking. At this point I shout, "Go," and we sprint down the hill. What little light was left struggled to make its way through the dense trees surrounding us, and the steep hill proved challenging to run down without a clear path to be seen. We both stumbled down the hill, almost falling multiple times and slamming our feet onto rocks and loose brush, but we didn't fall and we didn't look behind us. We make it to the bottom, but we must continue up the initial hill, and then we will have made it out. We persevere up the incline and make it back to our car. I briefly breathed in relief as I start my car, heart pounding and adrenaline racing. As I reverse onto the road, the person emerges at the trailhead, apparently breathing heavily. We finally get a glimpse of him. His hood had fallen off his head, exposing his pale complexion and dead eyes that were only illuminated by a single lantern at the start of the trail. He was holding something in his hand, but it was way too dark to see, and I was not interested in sticking around to make out the object. I shift into drive and accelerate as fast as my car can muster, leaving him behind in the dust of the empty side of the road.